Hello, and welcome to the Office of Cannabis Policy's training video on sampling flower and trim. My name is Diana McKenzie, and I am the chemist with OCP. Joining me is Victor Cody, a compliance inspector with OCP. This training video is designed to help licensees in the adult use cannabis program who need to sample batches of flower or trim for mandatory testing. This training can also be used by registrants in the medical program who wish to submit samples for testing. Before we get started, we wanted to make sure you're aware that there are additional materials available on OCP's website that will help you understand the sampling process and accurately take samples. Helpful resources for self-samplers include the Mandatory Testing Best Sampling Guide and Appendix A to Chapter 40.
Okay, let's take a moment to review why proper sampling is so important. First, proper sampling is important because accurate representative sampling is the foundation of reliable test results. Second, improper sampling can lead to false passes or failures, product recalls, enforcement action, or delays in getting product to market. In fact, sampling errors have contributed to compliance issues and prompted recalls, as we have discussed during previous OCP cannabis conversations. Overall, following standardized sampling procedures protects both public health and your business.
Before we jump into the actual sampling, let's talk about when a batch of flower or trim should be sampled. Sampling must take place after processing or treatment is complete, when the batch is in final form and ready for transfer to a retail facility. If the batch is going to be transferred to a manufacturer for further processing, no testing is required. Now, before taking the sample, be sure to contact your cannabis testing facility, also known as a lab or CTF, to ask about their requirements for submitting a sample. Once you are aware of any special requirements, such as what sample container to use, what paperwork needs to be filled out, or any special transportation requirements, you may prepare to take the sample. Also, don't forget, CTFs can be a great resource when you are in your planning stages for taking your first cannabis samples. It's always recommended to communicate early and openly with your testing facility so that you can avoid unnecessary problems.
Great, so now that you know what your lab requires and you have a batch ready for testing, it's time to select a location in your facility that's appropriate for taking and packaging your samples. This should be a well-lit room, such as a drying room or another location where the sampler has access to the entire batch of flower or trim to be sampled. The setup shown here reflects the conditions licensees should replicate when collecting samples. As Diana prepares the space, she first puts on a pair of sterile gloves to help prevent contamination. Clean gloves should always be worn during sampling and changed between batches as needed. You'll need a good, cleanable surface to work on with plenty of space. You should have extra gloves and all the tools you need laid out, clean and easily accessible. This is also a good time to double check that the batch is properly labeled and tracked in metric. Let's pause here and talk about these sampling tools for a moment. At a minimum, you'll need a scale that has been calibrated and verified annually. Calibration can be performed by a qualified scale calibration company. The scale needs to be capable of weighing down to 1/100th of a gram. It's also suggested that you have verification weights on hand that you can check your scale each time before you use it. If you do this and record your checks in a logbook, you'll be able to catch any weighing problems before they arise. You'll also need sample containers that are sterile and large enough to hold your complete sample. Whirl-Pack bags or the equivalent are available in several sizes and are easy to use. You could also use glass jars or plastic tubes if they are sterile and the right size. Some additional tools include indelible pens for labeling, forceps for grabbing your sample, a plastic cup for holding your sample container upright on the scale, labels that say for testing purposes only, metric tags, security tape, and a transport container. You also might possibly need foil for protecting the sample from light if you're submitting a sample for mycotoxin analysis.
Also make sure you have disposable gloves that are nitrile or latex, and bleach wipes or other decontamination method such as 70% ethanol spray, whatever works best to clean and sterilize your work surfaces, and any tools that are reusable. Now, before you start actually sampling, you need to know what size of a sample to collect. You can figure this out using the chart included in OCP's Best Practices Guide or in Chapter 40, Appendix A. For example, if your harvest batch weighs 6 kilograms or 6,000 grams, the chart shows you that you must collect a 16-gram sample made up of 16 individual 1-gram increments. All right, now it's time to take the sample. Before beginning, remember that all sampling must be recorded on camera in accordance with OCP requirements. Make sure your recording equipment is functioning properly and that the full sampling process is clearly visible. It may also be helpful to clearly display a sign with the batch number visible in the recording. This can make it easier to locate and reference the video later if needed. Alternatively, you may hold the package tag up to the camera so the tag number is clearly visible and in focus before you begin sampling. Using either a clearly written sign or the tag itself will help ensure the recording clearly identifies the batch being sampled. To protect the integrity of the sample, establish a clear clean hands and dirty hands approach before you begin. The person handling the sample should be wearing clean, sterile gloves and touch only the cannabis and sterile sampling tools. Those gloves should not come in contact with phones, paperwork, door handles, unclean scales, or any other non-sterile surfaces. If possible, have a second person manage those non-sterile tasks with their dirty hands. This person can help with opening bags, moving containers, handling paperwork, or adjusting equipment, so the sampler can keep their gloves clean throughout the process.
In order to get a representative sample of the whole batch, you don't just grab a nug from each container or cherry pick the best looking buds to submit. Representative sampling means collecting equal quantities from throughout the entire batch so that the lab results reflect the batch as a whole. You must make sure equal quantities of flour or trim are taken for each required increment, aiming for approximately 1/2 gram to 1 gram per increment depending on your batch size. The increments should be taken systematically from across the entire batch. For example, if a batch is stored in multiple bags or containers, you divide the required increments evenly among them and take material from different areas within each container, such as the top, middle, and bottom. Now let's walk through what this looks like in practice.
Victor will demonstrate how to take a representative sample from a batch of cannabis flower for mandatory testing in the adult use program. He is working on a clean, non-permeable surface with all sterile tools within easy reach, and he has access to the entire batch. For this demonstration, I will be the dirty hands person, and Victor will be clean hands. Also, in this example, we have a batch weighing 3,500 grams or 3.5 kilograms. Based on the sampling chart, this batch requires 9.5 gram sample made up of 19 individual half-gram increments. This does not need to be exact to the 100th of a gram, but with practice, you will become comfortable estimating half-gram increments. Our batch is stored in 3 bags, so Victor will collect material equally from each bag, gathering increments from multiple locations within each one. Before sampling begins, Victor labels the sample container with key identification information. such as date, strain, and harvest details. Victor places a holding container on the scale and then places the sample container inside it. He tears the scale to 0 and changes gloves to maintain sterile hands. He then begins collecting half-gram increments from the first bag, selecting material from different areas and from different sized buds.
In this case, I can have my assistant manipulate the container for me so I can reach all areas, top, middle, and bottom of the container. And as you see, I'm using a sterile, previously cleaned tongs, that way I don't have to put my hands inside the bag or the container.
The process is repeated for the remaining bags until the full 9.5 gram sample is collected. Once the sample is complete, Victor closes the sample container and applies a tamper-evident seal. He initials and dates the seal, adds the "for testing purposes only" label, and he also adds a metric package tag and places the sample into a secure transport container, such as a cooler, to maintain room temperature. He also records the final sample weight and the date and time of collection. If additional batches are sampled the same day, a new pair of gloves should be used for each batch, and all tools and surfaces should be cleaned and sterilized between batches. Once all the samples are collected and properly sealed and labeled, they may be transported together. And with that, the collection process is complete. Once the sample has been collected, no further processing of the batch or the sample may occur. This includes additional trimming, drying, heating, or any other remediation methods. The condition of the batch at the time of sampling must remain unchanged.
So once your sample is taken, the next step is to complete the required paperwork. This may be completed by the self-sampler, or it may be helpful to have a second person assisting during the sampling to fill out the paperwork. A chain of custody record, or COC, must be completed for each sample. This can be a paper document, or most CTFs also provide an electronic version. The COC documents key information, such as matrix type, number of containers, requested analysis, and the date and time the sample was collected. It's a good idea to work with your CTF to ensure all required information is completed accurately. As a reminder, the analysis required for flour, trim, and final form going to retail are potency, metals, pesticides, microbials, yeast and mold, water activity, and filth and foreign material. You can use the Creating a Test Sample Package in Metric training through the Metric Expert widget or Metric Learn to help you through determining what analysis are required for your sample. Lastly, a transport manifest must be completed for each sample. This form is generated through Metric as part of the lab sample transfer process. Both the self-sampler and the CTF must keep a copy of the COC and transport manifest. If assistance is needed while completing a transport manifest, the fastest way to get help is by using the Metric Expert widget, which is embedded directly within Metric and available on the same screen as the lab sample transfer. The widget provides access to guidance documents, step-by-step instructions, and the ability to open a support case or connect with a Metric expert during support hours. Licensees may also contact Metric support by phone at 1-877-566-6506. Please note that phone support is voicemail only on Sundays.
Once your sample has been taken and the paperwork has been completed, the licensee that collected the sample can deliver it to the CTF. Some CTFs also offer a pickup service that you can request. During transport, remember that 1, the samples must not be visible to the public and must be contained within an enclosed, locked area in the transport vehicle. 2, the sample collector must only travel between the cannabis establishment and the CTF. And 3, the samples of flower or trim must be kept at room temperature. Be sure not to let them get too warm or too cold within the vehicle. Using a cooler is a great option to maintain temperature during transportation.
As a reminder, before you begin taking your next samples, keep these do's and don'ts in mind. Do make sure you have full access to the entire batch before starting. Do verify your batch is active and correctly tracked in Metric. Do confirm your required sample size in increments before opening any containers. Don't cherry pick the best looking material, as sampling must be representative. Don't use contaminated tools or touch non-sterile surfaces with clean gloves. Don't guess if you're unsure about a requirement. Pause and verify before proceeding. Taking a few minutes to prepare can prevent errors and delays later. Keep in mind that an R&D sample of the batch may be taken and submitted for testing at any time. Results from an R&D sample are not recorded in Metric and will help tell you if the batch is ready for formal testing.
So, to recap what we've covered today, there are several resources available to help you sample properly, including OCP guidance and your cannabis testing facility. Sampling should take place after harvest, when the batch is in final form and ready for retail. Treat the sample the same way you treat the batch as a whole. Do not handle, process, or alter the sample differently from the material it represents. Collect equal quantities from throughout the entire batch based on the required sample size. Take increments systematically from different areas of each container to ensure the sample is representative. And finally, complete all required paperwork accurately. Following these steps helps ensure reliable test results, regulatory compliance, and consumer safety. Thank you for watching this OCP training video on sampling flower and trim. For additional guidance, please refer to OCP's published resources or contact your cannabis testing facility. We appreciate your efforts to maintain a safe and compliant regulated market.